The night had turned wild. Rain fell like it wanted to wash the whole world away. Wind howled across the open fields, bending trees, rattling windows, and shaking the old farmhouse on the edge of the valley. Thunder rolled over the hills again and again, so loud that even the chickens in Tom's coop refused to stay quiet. Tom Harris, a weathered farmer in his late 50s, pulled on his coat and grabbed a flashlight. He muttered under his breath about another storm ruining the week's work. The rain had already flooded half his cornfield, and now he worried about losing the rest of his animals. As he stepped outside, the wind slapped cold water across his face. The air smelled of wet earth and something faintly metallic like static electricity. He made his way toward the chicken coop. The light from his flashlight wavered in the heavy rain, cutting through the dark like a weak sword. The storm was strange tonight. It felt alive, like it was watching him. He tried to shake the thought away. When he reached the coop, he stopped. One of the doors was half open, swaying on its hinges. The chickens were making a low, nervous noise, and the flashlight beam caught something, a movement fast and quiet in the far corner. Tom frowned. Maybe it was a raccoon again. He stepped closer, his boots sinking into the wet mud. But then he froze. There, crouched beside a pile of straw, was not an animal. It was a person. The figure was small and thin, wrapped in a torn gray cloak. She was shivering, her back pressed against the wall. Her long silver hair clung to her face. When she looked up, Tom's light hit her eyes that shimmered faint blue, almost glowing. For a second, Tom couldn't move. The rain, the thunder, the chickens, all went silent in his mind. Those eyes weren't human. They looked like the reflection of stars on still water. "Ma'am?" he said quietly, his voice uncertain. "You lost or something?" The woman's lips trembled. "Please," she whispered. "We just needed shelter from the rain." Her voice was soft but carried an echo like it didn't belong fully in this world. Tom's hand tightened on his flashlight. He took a step closer and noticed something behind her, two small shapes huddled beneath the torn cloak. He aimed the light slightly lower and saw tiny faces peeking out. Children. Their skin had the same faint silver hue, and their eyes glowed like their mother's, but weaker, dimmer, as if frightened. He dropped his flashlight for a moment, startled. "Good Lord, kids?" The woman nodded slowly. "Please, no harm, just shelter?" She coughed, clutching her side. That's when Tom saw it. A wound running down her arm, glowing faintly blue like a burn made by fire and light together. Steam rose from it every time the rain touched her skin. Tom's instinct screamed to run, to call the sheriff, to do something. But when one of the little ones let out a weak whimper, everything in him softened. They weren't soldiers. They weren't dangerous. They were cold, hurt, and scared. He knelt slightly, keeping his voice calm. All right. You can stay here for a bit, just until the storm passes, but you'll have to tell me what's going on after that, you hear?" The woman looked relieved, nodding slowly. "Thank you, kind one." Tom turned toward the barn to get some blankets, but something caught his eye. Deep claw marks ran across the outer wall of the coop, long, curved, and freshly carved into the wood, as if made by something large and strong. He moved his flashlight along the marks. There were 3 sets, each deeper than the other, ending with small burnt spots like acid had touched the wood. The smell of metal and smoke filled the air again. Tom's heartbeat quickened. He turned back toward the woman. She was watching him silently, her glowing eyes wide with fear. "What did this?" he asked quietly. Her voice trembled. "They followed us." "Who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked past him toward the darkness beyond the fence. Tom turned too, and for a moment, between the flashes of lightning, he thought he saw something moving in the rain. A tall figure, thin and metallic, gliding silently across the field. Then it was gone, swallowed by the storm. He blinked and stepped back. What the hell was that? The woman pulled her children closer. "Please," she whispered, almost begging now. "Don't let them find us." Tom didn't understand any of this, but he knew one thing. Whoever or whatever was out there, it wasn't safe. He helped the woman and her children stand, wrapping his old coat around them. "Come on," he said firmly. "We're getting you out of here." As they hurried toward the barn, lightning split the sky again, lighting up the muddy field. In that brief flash, Tom saw it. Shadows moving fast through the rain, metallic and silent, searching. He swallowed hard, pushing the barn door open. "Stay quiet," he whispered. The woman's voice was barely a breath. Thank you. Human. Tom blinked, but before he could ask what she meant, thunder roared overhead, shaking the ground. The storm wasn't letting up, and somewhere beyond the rain, the real danger was closing in. Rain still hammered the roof of the old barn, drumming like 1,000 nervous fingers. The wind slipped through every crack, carrying the cold smell of metal and mud. Inside, Tom was trying to catch his breath. The lantern on the workbench flickered weakly, throwing golden light over wooden beams and piles of hay. The woman sat near the corner, her 2 children wrapped in old blankets Tom had found. Their strange silver skin gleamed softly even in the dim light. They looked frightened but calm, watching every movement he made as if unsure whether to trust him. Tom wiped rain from his face and crouched beside them. "You can stay here till morning," he said, trying to sound steady. "But you've got to tell me what's going on. Who's out there chasing you?" The woman hesitated, her glowing eyes filled with sorrow. "If I tell you, you may not believe me." Tom gave a small, tired laugh. "Lady, I already found 3 glowing strangers in my chicken coop. I'm well past the point of disbelief." She studied him quietly. Then slowly she pulled her arm from the blanket. The wound was worse than before. The glow from it pulsed like a heartbeat, brightening and fading in a rhythm that made Tom's skin crawl. He reached for his first aid kit. "Don't touch it," she said sharply, then softened. "It isn't like your wounds. It carries signal." Tom froze. "Signal?" She nodded. "They can follow it." The word they hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. The children looked down, holding each other tightly. Tom didn't ask again. Instead, he looked around the barn. It was old, built by his grandfather, full of half-broken tools and old farm equipment. But beneath one section of the floor was something only he knew. A storage pit hidden under a wooden hatch. His father had used it years ago to hide valuables from thieves. He moved a few hay bales aside and pulled up the hatch. A square hole opened, just big enough for 3 people to fit inside. "Get in," he said. The woman's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because whoever's out there, they'll be back. And if you're right about that wound, they'll know you're close." She looked uncertain, then finally nodded. "Thank you." "Tom Harris," he blinked in surprise. "I never told you my name." She only looked at him quietly, a faint shimmer in her eyes. "I can see what people are when they speak," she said softly. "You are kind." Tom wasn't sure what to make of that. He helped her climb down with the children and closed the hatch just as another flash of lightning filled the sky. The thunder this time wasn't far. It sounded like a blast from the hills. He stayed by the barn door, holding his old rifle. The sound of engines came next, 3, maybe 4. Then beams of white light cut across the rain. They had arrived. Through a crack in the wall, Tom saw the vehicles. They were black, boxy, and silent, their tires barely making a sound on the wet ground. Men stepped out, but they didn't move like regular men. Their steps were too even, too smooth. One of them turned its head and Tom saw no face, just a dark helmet with a thin red line that glowed like a slit of fire. One of the trackers raised a handheld device. It emitted a faint hum, sweeping the ground. Every time it pointed near the barn, the hum grew louder. Tom's heart thudded painfully. He aimed his rifle at the door but knew it was useless. He had 1 shot, maybe 2, and against whatever those things were, it wouldn't matter. Suddenly the hum grew sharp and fast. Beep, beep, beep. The device was pointing directly at the barn. Tom's pulse raced. He thought of the mother and her children hidden below the floor. He couldn't let them be found. He took a deep breath, kicked the lantern off the table, and it crashed to the floor. The light went out, plunging the barn into darkness. From outside, one of the trackers called out in a metallic voice, "Identify yourself." "You are in violation of Containment Order 7B. Tom shouted back, "This is private land. You got no right to be here." The trackers didn't answer. Instead, one of them scanned the barn again. The hum spiked and then suddenly stopped. A few seconds later, one of them spoke again, flat and cold. "No life signs. Move to next sector." Their lights turned away. The vehicles rolled slowly toward the far fields. Tom waited, barely breathing, until the sound faded into the rain. Only then did he lift the hatch again. The woman and her children were curled together, trembling. "They're gone," he whispered. The woman's voice was faint, but steady. "No, they will come again." "The signal is still alive," Tom frowned. "Then what do we do?" She looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with pain and determination. "We hide until it fades, and pray the sky doesn't find us first." Tom didn't know what she meant, But when he looked at her wound again, he saw the faint pulse of light travel upward, fading into the ceiling, as if sending a silent message into the clouds. The storm outside roared louder. Somewhere far away, something metallic answered. The storm had passed by dawn, but the silence it left behind felt wrong. The air was heavy, damp and still, the kind of silence that made even the birds stay quiet. The world seemed to be holding its breath. Tom hadn't slept. He sat by the barn door with a mug of cold coffee in his hands, staring at the fading night sky. The ground outside shimmered with puddles of silver rainwater, and his chickens pecked nervously at the mud, refusing to stray too far from the coop. Inside, under the warm hay, the alien mother and her 2 children slept. The woman's name, Lyra, now echoed in his thoughts. She had told him in whispers before sunrise when her pain grew worse. Her wound glowed faintly under her skin, but the light was dimmer now, as if fading. That gave him a small hope, but something about the way she looked at the sky before falling asleep unsettled him. It wasn't fear in her eyes. It was grief, like someone who already knew the end of the story. Tom rubbed his face and stood. The rain had washed away many things during the night. Footprints, tire marks, even most of the claw scratches on the coop wall. But one mark remained, burned deep into the wood. When he touched it, it was warm. He looked toward the horizon. The clouds were breaking apart, streaks of pink and gold showing through. The beauty of it almost made him forget the danger until he heard it, a low hum, deep and distant. Not thunder. Engines. Tom stiffened. He set his mug down and walked toward the barn door, his boots sinking into the mud. The sound grew louder, smooth, mechanical, inhumanly steady. He ran back inside and whispered urgently, "Lyra, wake up." She stirred, her silver hair falling across her face. Her eyes opened instantly, alert and sharp. "They are here. How do you know?" he asked. She pointed toward her wound. The glow had returned, and brighter than ever. "Because they never stop once they have scent." Tom swallowed hard. He peeked through a small gap in the barn wall. Over the rise of the dirt road, 3 black vehicles approached. They didn't move like trucks. They floated just above the ground, engines humming with a smooth, metallic rhythm. "Stay down," he said quickly, closing the hatch that led to the secret pit beneath the floor. He tossed a few hay bales over it to hide the entrance. Outside, the vehicles stopped. 4 figures stepped out, tall, armored, their faces covered by reflective helmets. No one spoke. One raised a silver device that emitted a sweeping blue light across the field. Tom's heartbeat pounded in his ears. The light moved over the coop, the farmhouse, and then the barn. When it touched the barn wall, the device gave a sharp ping. The soldiers, or whatever they were, turned immediately. Tom grabbed his rifle. He didn't think, didn't plan. He stepped out of the barn and shouted, "Hey! You're trespassing. This is private land." The nearest figure turned its head toward him. Its voice was cold and filtered. "Unregistered biologicals detected." "Step aside, human," Tom gritted his teeth. "You'll have to go through me first." The second figure raised a weapon, something sleek and glowing, not like any gun he'd ever seen. The barrel shimmered with faint blue light. "Cease interference," the machine said flatly. Tom raised his rifle, hands shaking. "Back off." Then the first bolt fired. Not a bullet, but a flash of energy that ripped through the air, striking the barn wall and setting it ablaze with blue fire. The shockwave knocked Tom to the ground. Inside the barn, the children screamed. Lyra's voice cried out, "Tom!" He stumbled to his feet, coughing. The machines advanced slowly, their light scanning through the smoke. Tom fired his rifle once and the bullet bounced uselessly off one of their chests. "Target hostile," one of them said. Tom ducked behind his tractor. Another energy blast hit, tearing through the metal. Heat burned his arm, but he didn't stop. He grabbed a pitchfork and jammed it into a fuel barrel. Then as the soldiers moved closer, he kicked it toward them. The barrel rolled, and Lyra from beneath the barn lifted her glowing hand through a crack in the floor. A blue surge flashed outward. The energy hit the barrel, igniting it in a burst of light and fire. The explosion threw dirt, smoke, and machine parts everywhere. For a brief moment, everything went still. Tom opened his eyes. The front of the barn was gone, flames licking upward. 2 of the machines were destroyed, their armor cracked and sparking. But one still stood, barely touched, its red visor burning through the smoke. Lyra crawled out from beneath the floor, staggering. The wound on her arm pulsed wildly, each beat sending a blue flare through her veins. The last hunter raised its weapon again, but she lifted her hand first. "You will not take them," she whispered. Her voice echoed through the air, vibrating like thunder. The light from her body erupted, bright, powerful, alive. The machine stumbled back as the wave of energy blasted through its armor. It screamed in a voice that wasn't human and fell, its red visor shattering into silence. Tom blinked, unable to move. The barn was half ruined, the ground still glowing faintly from her power. Lyra fell to her knees, breathing heavily. "They will send more," she said weakly. "They always send more." Tom helped her stand. "Then we'll be ready next time." She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time since they met, she smiled faintly. "You are not like others," he shook his head. "No, but neither are you." And as the morning sun rose behind them, its light reflected off the distant cloud, where far above, something vast and metallic was already descending. The fire from the barn burned through the night, painting the sky with a ghostly orange glow. By dawn, only the charred frame remained, smoke curling lazily in the cold morning air. Tom stood beside the wreckage, his hands trembling slightly. He had spent all night making sure the children were safe, covering the tracks of the battle, and trying to convince himself that what he saw, glowing eyes, alien fire, metal hunters, wasn't some fever dream. But every time he looked toward the field, he saw proof that it was real. The machines had bled silver fluid into the mud, and their armor still hummed faintly as if it remembered being alive. Behind him, Lyra sat near a fallen beam, her children asleep against her side. She looked weaker now. The blue light inside her wound flickered like a dying flame. Her silver hair was tangled, her once glowing skin pale as frost. Tom knelt beside her. "You need rest," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Rest means nothing to me now. We must keep moving." "Moving where?" he asked. "They'll find us anywhere, won't they?" Lyra looked out toward the horizon. "If we can reach the mountain line, they will not track us easily. Too much iron in the ground." "It blocks signal," Tom frowned. "That's 50 miles away." She turned to him with tired eyes. "Then we walk." He wanted to argue, but when he looked at the children curled beside her, he couldn't. He had seen enough fear in his life to recognize the kind that doesn't fade. These kids hadn't just lost their home, and they had lost their entire world. He stood and walked to the farmhouse. Inside, he found his old truck keys, a map, and a box of canned food. As he packed, his eyes landed on a photo, a small frame sitting on the counter. It was of him and his wife, back when the farm was full of life. She had passed away years ago, long before any of this madness. For the first time in years, Tom whispered a prayer. When he returned to the barn, Lyra was standing. She looked fragile, yet something in her posture had changed. She wasn't running anymore. She was surviving. Tom nodded toward the truck. "It ain't much, but it'll get us there." Lyra glanced at the rusted pickup. "This human machine, it can travel far?" Tom smirked. "Far enough if we don't get caught." She managed a faint smile. "Then I will trust your machine." He helped her and the children climb into the back, covered them with blankets, and started the engine. The old truck groaned like an old beast waking from hibernation. The road was wet, the tires slipping in the mud, but they moved. Every mile between them and the burning barn felt like another heartbeat stolen from death. For a while, no one spoke. The only sounds were the engine, the wind, and the distant echo of thunder behind them. The children peeked over the blanket sometimes, curious about everything. The fences, the trees, the open fields. To them, this quiet planet must have seemed impossibly peaceful. After an hour, Lyra spoke softly. "You risked your life for strangers." Tom kept his eyes on the road. "Didn't feel right letting soldiers, or whatever those things were, kill a mother and her kids. In my world," she said, "humans are stories told to frighten children. But you are different." Tom chuckled lightly. "In my world, aliens are stories too." Funny how both our worlds were wrong. Lyra smiled faintly, then coughed, a harsh metallic sound. The wound on her arm flared again. Blue light crawled up her veins, spreading toward her shoulder. Tom stopped the truck immediately. Hey, stay still," he said, opening his first aid box. "You need help." She shook her head weakly. "You cannot fix this. It is not blood. It is energy." Tom stared helplessly as she pressed her hand to her wound. Her skin glowed and suddenly the air around them shimmered, as if space itself bent slightly. The glow faded after a moment, leaving her breathing heavily. The children climbed forward, holding her hands. "Mom," the little girl whispered. "It hurts again." Lyra brushed her daughter's hair softly. "It will pass, my star." "It always does." Tom sat back in the driver's seat, shaken but silent. As the road curved along a ridge, the landscape opened up, endless plains stretching under a pale morning sun. The light reflected on Lyra's face, turning her eyes gold for a moment. Tom looked at her, then at the sky. "Lyra, what really happened to your world?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and filled with weight. "Our son was dying. We sent families to find new homes. But the hunters, they were made by us before the end, machines meant to protect us from outsiders. When our world fell, they decided no one was pure enough to survive." Tom frowned. "So now they hunt their own creators?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, they think only silence is peace." Tom gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Not while you're on this planet, they won't." Lyra studied his face, rough, tired, yet full of stubborn courage. She reached out and rested a hand on his arm. "You are strange, Tom Harris," she said softly. "Strange. And kind." He smiled faintly. "Guess that makes two of us." As the truck rolled down the dirt road, the sky above them shimmered faintly, a silent signal crossing the clouds. Neither of them noticed it, but far beyond the atmosphere, metal eyes opened, locking onto their direction. The next storm was already coming. The sun slipped behind the mountains like a wounded ember, leaving the world in a cold, red glow. The day had been quiet, too quiet, and Tom felt the weight of that silence pressing on his chest. Every few minutes he glanced at the sky. He didn't know what he was looking for, but something deep inside told him they weren't safe yet. They had reached an abandoned cabin halfway up the ridge. The roof was cracked and ivy covered the walls, but it was shelter. Tom parked the truck behind a cluster of trees and helped Lyra inside. The air smelled of pine, dust, and old smoke. The children settled near the stone fireplace. Tom used what dry wood he could find to light a small fire. The orange glow spread across the room, warm and gentle, so different from the cold blue light that haunted them. Lyra sat close to the fire, her silver eyes reflecting the flames. The wound on her arm had dimmed again, though her breathing was shallow. "They will come tonight," she said quietly. Tom paused. "You sure?" She nodded. "They move when light fades. They follow the signal until it stops." Tom gritted his teeth. "Then I'll make sure it stops with me standing in the way." He began checking his rifle, though deep down he knew bullets wouldn't help much. He'd seen what those things could survive. Still, he couldn't do nothing. Lyra watched him silently, then spoke. "You protect without reason. That is rare." Tom gave a dry chuckle. "I got plenty of reason. Those two kids sleeping over there, and that's reason enough." Lyra smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both gratitude and sorrow. "They remind me of light before war. Before machines forgot mercy." The wind outside began to rise, whispering through the broken window panes. The sound wasn't natural. It had rhythm, like static between radio waves. Lyra's head lifted instantly. Her pupils narrowed to slits of glowing blue. "They are close," she said. Tom stood up and grabbed the lantern. "How close?" Her answer came in a whisper. "Too close to run." Before he could react, the forest outside exploded in white light. Beams of energy sliced through the trees, setting branches ablaze. The night filled with a metallic hum, the same sound he'd heard before, only this time louder, stronger, closer. Tom shouted, "Get down!" as the window shattered inward. He pulled Lyra and the children behind the fireplace wall. The air buzzed with heat and smoke. Outside, 3 shadowed figures appeared through the trees, glowing red lines across their armor. Their movements were fluid, their heads turning in perfect unison. One of them raised its weapon. Tom fired his rifle. 1, 2, 3 shots, but they ricocheted harmlessly off their armor. Sparks flew and the machines didn't even flinch. Lyra pressed her hand against the floor. The wood beneath her began to glow faint blue. "Cover your eyes," she cried. A surge of energy pulsed outward, bursting through the walls. The machine staggered backward as the cabin erupted in a flash of light. The children screamed, covering their ears. The nearest tracker disintegrated mid-step, its armor melting into liquid metal, but the other two adapted. They adjusted, their armor darkening, absorbing the next wave of energy. Lyra's light began to fade, her power draining. She fell to her knees, her hand trembling. Tom ran to her side. "Lyra!" She looked up, eyes dim but fierce. "Get them out, Tom. Take the children and go." He shook his head. "Not without you," she smiled weakly. "Humans are stubborn." "Yeah," he said, lifting her arm over his shoulder. "And sometimes that saves the day." They stumbled toward the back door, the fire spreading fast. The machines were cutting through the cabin walls now, beams of heat slicing through wood and air. Tom kicked open the door, but before they could escape, one of the machines appeared in front of them, blocking the exit. Its voice was cold and sharp. "Unauthorized species detected. Eliminate." Tom stood between it and the others, his hands shaking but steady. "You'll have to go through me first." The machine raised its weapon, but before it could fire, Lyra pushed Tom aside. Her body glowed brighter than ever before, her eyes burning like twin stars. She whispered something in her language, a sound both beautiful and heartbreaking. Then she unleashed everything she had left. The blast was silent. Pure light bursting outward, devouring the night. The shockwave tore through the forest, melting snow, breaking branches, silencing every sound. When it was over, the cabin was gone. The machines were vaporized. Only the faint smell of rain and smoke remained. Tom lay on the ground, ears ringing. His clothes were scorched, but he was alive. He turned and saw the children huddled under the remains of the fireplace, unharmed, the air around them faintly shimmering like a shield. But Lyra, she was on her knees, her body fading like mist, her glow dimmed with every breath. Tom crawled toward her, his throat tight. Hey, stay with me." "You did it, they're gone." She smiled faintly. "For now." Her hand reached toward him, fingers trembling. "Protect them. My stars." Then she touched his chest. A faint spark passed between them, warm and soft, and she was gone. Only the blanket she had wrapped around her children remained, glowing for a moment before falling still. The fire died. The night fell quiet again. Tom sat in the ashes, holding the blanket, tears mixing with the rain. The children crawled to his side, clutching his arm. He looked up at the empty sky, voice shaking. "I will. I promise." Somewhere far above the clouds, unseen by any human eye, a signal blinked once and a single blue pulse fading into darkness. The hunters would come again. But next time, Earth wouldn't be unprepared. Morning came slowly, creeping through the ashes of the burned forest like a ghost. Smoke still hung over the ridge, soft and gray, rising into a sky washed pale by dawn. Tom sat on a fallen log, staring at what was left of the cabin. A blackened circle of earth glowing faintly with strange silver embers. The children were silent. They sat close together, wrapped in an old coat Tom had found in the truck. The little girl, Mira, kept her head on her brother's shoulder. Her eyes, usually glowing soft blue, were now dull with exhaustion. The boy, Keo, just watched Tom, saying nothing. There was no crying, no fear, just quiet understanding, as if they already knew what death meant. Lyra was gone. Not even ashes remained, only a faint shimmer in the soil that flickered every time the wind touched it. Tom rubbed his face, his hands trembling. He had seen death before, those soldiers, storms, accidents, but never like this. Never someone who vanished as light instead of blood. He looked up at the sky. It was peaceful now, too peaceful. The silence after the storm felt like a warning, not a blessing. He had learned one thing in all his years. When the world goes quiet, it's only because it's waiting for the next sound. He stood, his boots crunching on the wet soil. "Come on, kids," he said softly. "We can't stay here." They followed him without question. He led them back to the truck, still half covered in ash. The windshield was cracked and the hood was dented, but it started with a growl. As he drove down the dirt path, Mira finally spoke. "Where is she?" Tom's throat tightened. He didn't have the heart to lie. "She's gone, sweetheart. But she wanted me to look after you." Keo looked out the window, his small hands gripping the seat. "Then we stay with you." Tom glanced at him, then back at the road. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You stay with me." They drove for miles, through the forest, down the valley, across the open plains. The morning light grew brighter, golden over the hills. To anyone else, it would have been a beautiful day. But Tom couldn't stop seeing the flashes of blue light behind his eyelids. The fire, the explosion, Lyra's last words echoing in his mind. Protect them. High stars. By noon they reached the outskirts of town. Tom pulled over behind a gas station, where an old public phone still stood by the wall. He hesitated, then picked it up and called the sheriff's office. "Sheriff Moore here," came the rough voice on the other end. "Hey, it's Tom Harris," he said. "There was a fire up by the North Ridge. Lost the cabin." "Damn shame," the sheriff replied. "You okay?" "Yeah," Tom lied. "Just smoke damage. Nothing serious. You sure about that? Folks in town said they saw lights last night. Blue flashes, loud noise. Thought it might have been lightning strikes." Tom's hand tightened on the receiver. "Yeah," he said carefully. "Lightning," the sheriff sighed. "Storm season's getting weirder every year. You want me to send someone up to help you clean up?" "No," Tom said quickly. "I'll handle it." He hung up before the sheriff could ask more questions. For a long moment he just stood there staring at the phone. The world would never believe what really happened, and even if they did, he couldn't risk anyone finding the children. He looked back at the truck. Mira and Keo were sitting quietly, watching him with those soft silver eyes that seemed to see right through everything. He took a deep breath and got back in. "All right," he said, forcing a small smile. "Let's find a new place to call home." They drove again, farther west, toward the foothills where the land stretched into quiet farmlands and old forests. Tom found an abandoned farmhouse off the main road, surrounded by tall grass and wildflowers. It was small but sturdy. Safe. That night he tucked the children into bed for the first time. They didn't cry. Instead, they whispered to each other in their strange melodic language. Tom sat by the window watching the stars. He thought of Lyra again, of her courage, her voice, the way she looked at him with both fear and faith. Somewhere deep down he felt she wasn't entirely gone. Then he noticed something, a faint shimmer in the sky, a single streak of blue light moving among the stars. It wasn't falling. It was watching, Tom whispered. "If you can hear me, Lyra, they're safe. I'll keep them safe." The shimmer pulsed once, bright, gentle, then disappeared. Tom sat back, eyes heavy, but his heart steady. The world might come for them again, but this time he would be ready. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something he hadn't realized he'd taken from the ashes, a small piece of Lyra's pendant. It still glowed faintly, warm against his palm. When he held it near the window, it flickered in rhythm with the stars. That night, as the children slept, Tom made his choice. He wasn't just their protector anymore. He was their father now, and anyone who came to take them would have to face more than just a farmer. They'd face the man who'd already survived the night of fire. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of peace that feels fragile, like one wrong breath could shatter it. The new farmhouse sat tucked between the hills, hidden behind a stretch of trees that looked ordinary to anyone driving by. No one came up the old dirt path anymore. Not the mailman, not the sheriff, not even the neighbors from town. For Tom, that was a blessing. He had told people he sold the farm and moved out west to start over. In truth, he hadn't gone far, just far enough to disappear. The children adjusted faster than he expected. Mira loved the chickens. She named each one in her own strange musical tongue. Keo spent hours taking apart old tools and putting them back together, his hands glowing faintly whenever he concentrated. They laughed softly now. Not the frightened whispers from before, but real laughter that made the lonely old house feel alive again. Tom had changed too. He still woke before dawn, made coffee, and fed the animals. But every time he looked toward the horizon, he found himself scanning the sky, not the fields. He'd learned to tell the difference between an airplane and something that didn't belong. The faint blue streaks that moved too smooth, too quiet, too perfect. He hadn't seen one for weeks. Until that morning, it came just after sunrise, a distant hum that rolled across the valley like thunder without rain. The coffee cup slipped slightly in his hand. He stepped out onto the porch, squinting against the light. There, high above the tree line, something gleamed, a silver shimmer cutting through the clouds. It wasn't close enough to threaten, not yet, but it was watching. Tom stood still, his pulse steady. "Not today," he muttered. "Not while they're still breathing." Behind him, Mira appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. It's the sky people again? She asked in her soft accent. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but don't worry, kiddo. They don't come where they're not welcome. She nodded solemnly as if she understood far more than a child should. Mama's watching too, she said. She said so in my dream. Tom turned to her, his throat tightening. Yeah, he whispered. I think she is. That night after the children were asleep, he went out to the field. The moonlight poured silver over the wet grass and the air smelled fresh, clean like the world after rain. He knelt down and placed his hand on the earth. The ground beneath him was faintly warm. He felt it, a pulse soft but steady. Lyra's energy. The same shimmer he'd seen in the ashes months ago now lived here, buried deep under the soil. It wasn't gone. It had taken root. The pendant she'd left behind began to glow in his pocket brighter than ever. He took it out, holding it up toward the sky. The glow spread gently, casting faint blue light over the fields. Somewhere in the distance, the shimmer in the clouds responded. A single beam of light flickered once, not hostile, not searching. Just watching. Tom smiled softly. She kept her promise. He turned back toward the farmhouse. Through the window he could see Mira and Keo asleep, their small forms curled under the blanket. For the first time since the night of fire, he felt something deep inside him shift. Not fear, not grief, but purpose. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was guarding something sacred, not just two alien children, but the fragile bridge between two worlds. Weeks passed. The crops began to grow again. Tom taught the children how to plant seeds, how to tend animals, how to build, how to laugh. In return, they taught him words from their language, gentle sounds that carried meaning deeper than English could hold. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, he could hear faint voices in it, soft and distant, like songs carried from another sky. And sometimes, when the rain fell and the lightning rolled over the hills, the clouds would flash with a strange blue glow, a reminder that somewhere beyond them, something powerful and kind still watched over them. One evening, Tom carved a small wooden sign and placed it at the edge of the property. It read, Harrison Starr's Farm. Mira had drawn little star symbols beside his name. Keo had added a faint glowing mark in the wood, a symbol from their old world that meant safe. Tom stood back, smiling faintly. Looks good, he said. Home, Mira said simply. He nodded. Home. As the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the world gold and blue, Tom realized something he hadn't understood before. Lyra hadn't just given him her children. She'd given him a reason to live again. The night came quiet and calm. Tom sat on the porch with his old rifle across his knees, the pendant glowing faintly in his hand. He looked at the stars and whispered, They're safe. Lyra, you can rest now. The sky shimmered once in reply, soft, gentle, like a mother's touch. And for the first time since that stormy night, Tom Harris, farmer, protector, and now father of stars, finally smiled without fear. The rain had ended, but the story of what came after was only just beginning.